Hi, today we're joined by Ian Henderson, a former sales leadership and management trainer with over 30 years experience. We talk about effective communication and how understanding your people can help your business thrive. Let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Dan, and welcome to our podcast,
where we talk to real people about real problems in real situations.
Grab a cuppa while we talk founder life. Hi Ian, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey so far.
Okay, my pleasure, Dan. My pleasure. I've got a lot of history, being 67 years of age as I am. I suppose from a business point of view, my business journey started in 1993 when I left BP to set up the training business. Never ever thought I would ever do anything as brave as that, but I thought, what the heck, let's give it a go. So for 30 years, I've been sort of leading this company. It's been challenging, sometimes extremely challenging, but there's always things to get over, as you know, as we've known each other for a few years. I think there's two things for me really that may come up during today's conversation. One is the challenges of the business, which I say are many and varied. And the other is the importance really of training as a business related issue. So maybe both of those topics can be touched upon during our time together. But it's been a very cliche time. It's been a very interesting journey over the last 30 years, as I'm recently retired and I can look back to things that went well and things which perhaps didn't go well and maybe I could have done differently. But you don't know that at the time, right? You just make the decisions with the best information you have, with the best outcomes in mind.
Yeah. How did you find that initial transition from BP to self-employed?
In a word, Dan, scary.
Yeah,
it was scary. I had a choice basically because I could have gone back or stayed in BP in another role which I didn't really fancy at all. And having recently spent 3 years seconded to a culture change project, my appetite for all things organisational development had been whetted, and I didn't really want to give up on that. So I lucked out in the sense that I met somebody, and maybe we can touch on this as we go, but he became my mentor and encouraged me to start out on my own, albeit in a very small way. But it was incredibly scary. I remember on January the 1st, 1994, sitting in a bedroom, which became our office, thinking, what have I done?
I think a lot of us have had that thought.
Yeah, don't we? I had two young children, 5 and 2, and thinking like, is this going to work? How is this going to work? So incredibly scary. But looking back, best thing I ever did professionally. My wife Wendy came up with a very interesting comment a good few years ago now. She said, "It's a good job you did that, So when inquiring why do you think it was a good job, she said, because basically you're unemployable. And I think that's true of a lot of people who start their own businesses. For many people, they are unemployable because they challenge and they think in different ways from people who are in what I used to call the corporate womb, doing what they did just to get the paycheck. So I take my hat off to anybody who sets up their own business. And I've been asked by people in the past to give my experiences and my story. And I'm always happy to do that, warts and all, because I don't think it's something that you should do on a whim. I've met a lot of people over the last 30 years who want to set up a business because they want to be their own boss, which I certainly did. That's absolutely true. And it seems to me that there's more than just a small number who want to do it because they think that it's going to give them loads of time. They can play golf, go swimming, go to the spa or whatever they want to, and still be successful in business.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you that doesn't work. Running your own business is expletive hard work. It really is. It really is.
It really is. I think we can all relate to that. And I know personally from myself, when I went self-employed and moved to Temple, went self-employed, you do kind of think, oh, I'll have more time on my hands. You actually end up with less time on your hands.
Yeah. Yeah,
you end up with a lot less on your hands with that. Go on, Cheryl, you're going to say something?
I was going to say less, but more on your terms in a way.
Yes.
Because you can dictate when you do work, and it's your choice to work of an evening or weekends and stuff, because you want to get it done, because you just want to do the best you can, don't you? So
yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted anyway.
No, it's not.
But it's worth it. But it's worth it.
Yeah. I believe so. Having spent the last 30 years doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. You said about warts and all. Do you want to tell us about some of the warts and all?
Oh, do I have to? Yeah. I think for me, from a business perspective, I've often been asked, what's the secret? I mean, we as the training company, we were never more really than a small business, but this country needs small businesses. It keeps the wheels going. And it was never my intention to have a monolithic sized training organisation. But I think I learned very early on, I say partly through great advice, and in many ways that's one of the first tips I would give anybody, is to go to people and ask for their advice. I'm a big fan of this thing called NLP, which in case you don't know stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And one of the concepts behind it, and one that I got into very early on, 25 years ago, is this notion of modelling, which essentially is find someone who's doing what you want to do really well, and then study them to replicate it. I'm not saying copy them in its entirety. And I think one of the warts that I had in the early days of the business was not doing that. So what that meant was I spent a lot of money. I spent a lot of time going down some very leafy lanes and sometimes dark holes to no benefit, no benefit whatsoever. And I think that's one of the lessons that I would always put out there for people, is to really think carefully about what's your message, which I didn't do. What's really your marketplace? Who are you trying to attract? Because that for me is the key. It's not for me going out and literally sort of putting myself on clients. It's having clients being attracted to me and the company and the things that we do. And the third thing to do is to be very wary of or cognizant of the medium or media in this day and age that you're going to use to get your message to your market. Now, you asked me about the warts, Dan, and the warts where I didn't do that. I didn't do that. So what I lacked was total focus. And it was almost like, what's the next shiny thing? And that cost me, as I said a moment or two ago, that cost me an incredible amount of money and an incredible amount of time. And also stress. Because, I've seen these business gurus over the years say, max your credit card, go to the bank, remortgage your house, put as much money as you can into your business because it's going to pay you back. Well, that's one way of doing it. But it's although I started to do that early on, fortunately, this mentor that I mentioned, he reined me in. in no uncertain terms. And he said, look, you need focus. You don't need to be throwing money at this willy-nilly. You need focus on what's your message, who's your market, and how you're getting there. It was easier for me than nowadays, to be frank, because back then, this is in the days of, no social media, no websites. So the biggest marketing medium was, I think, probably Yellow Pages, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
But then what did you do with that? How did you go in the Yellow Pages and find out who you were going to approach? So, I mean, all that obviously has changed over 30 years in some ways. So I think learning, Colin, my mentor, said to me, the one thing you're going to have to do is learn to market. Yes, you're going to need to know your subject. Yes, you're going to need to know how to deliver as a facilitator and a speaker and a presenter. But that's no good if you don't know how to market. Mm. And those words stayed with me. I mean, I'm still, he's a very good friend and I love him dearly. But those words were absolutely key to me changing my way and, bazookaing those warts that I had in and around the business. But notwithstanding that, it was still tough. It was still tough.
No.
And I remember the day when I think I realised that we were going in the right direction. And that was a heck of a day. That was a heck of a day.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
You're both going to ask me that question, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What basically happened? As I say, for us it was about attracting rather than imposing ourselves onto clients. Because although we didn't want to be a big international monolithic training company, we did want to get some fairly big clients. And as you know, Dan, over our time together, for a company as small as we were, to have companies like Robert Bosch, to have companies like Premier Foods, to have companies like Network Rail and Siemens as part of your client list was no small feat. And I think it was the day when actually we looked at the client list. We had a meeting of the team, and we looked at the client list, and we were going down it, and we're going like, wow, we've got some big names, and they keep coming back. I've been retired now a wee while, and I'm still getting the clients ring me up and saying, can you come back and do another leadership or another management or another sales? And I have to admit, and my wife Wendy will probably tell you this, that there is a temptation. Because actually I loved doing what I did. Absolutely loved it. And I think it was that more than anything, it wasn't pennies in the bank. It was the success we were getting attracting those big names. Now we had smaller, more local names as well. It wasn't all national stuff. But that was a real pat ourselves on the back kind of a moment, because that showed us more than anything else that what we were actually doing was working. And I think sometimes we need to know that. Because if you don't know what's working, how can you replicate it? And if you don't know something isn't working, how can you change it? So then you carry on throwing money at things and spending time doing things which have got no payback whatsoever. So yeah, we were sat in our office, and it was like, hey, it was almost like, we're doing good here. We're doing good, And I have to say, it was only really with the support of family and friends, because it wasn't all, as you know, it's never all plain sailing. So that support was absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. So, being the leader of the business, I thought it was time to reward them, so I made the coffees, which I thought I was duty bound to do. Somebody suggested I should buy some pastries as well, but the budget didn't run to that.
I think that's
yeah.
I still think it is the gesture.
It's the gesture. Yeah, it's absolutely right. Absolutely. And in many ways, leadership is about our gestures. It's doing tiny things sometimes, but those tiny things actually can make a very big difference to how people feel about you as the leader. And in its own way, that took me a long time to get used to. I mean, while I was just myself and Wendy, my wife, working together in those very early days, it was easy. You know, the roles were quite clearly defined. But then as we grew the business and we started to bring some more people into the business in various ways, then it kind of changed, and it took me a long time to recognise that actually I am the person that people look to. You know, in the Navy, my uncle, God bless him, but my uncle was in the Navy, and he said there was this notion of all hands on deck. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, what does that mean? And he said, well, basically, he said, when you're in a leadership position, when you're in these situations, all eyes are on you, you know, as a leader. And everything you do, everything you say will be measured against what you say you're going to do, what you say you're going to say. Mm. And I became a big fan of using metaphor in the training work and the sort of work that I did. And to me, it's very much like the Truman Show, in the sense that it's like not necessarily 24 hours a day, but a good chunk of your day, a good chunk of your time working in the business, you're going to have people looking at you that you don't really know are looking at you. You know, and you can't afford to then, you know, make the mistake of doing and saying something that you didn't say you were going to do or say, kind of thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so that was one of the biggest challenges of leadership. And at the same time, of course, you've got to keep your eye on the numbers, you've got to keep your eye on the money, and you know.
It's a proper juggling act, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. How many times, you know, as entrepreneurs and self-employed people, could we do with an extra pair of hands ourselves, you know, just to get through what we need to do.
Absolutely. Yes, yeah. We all need support, don't we? We all need that support to get through it all.
You can't do it on your own.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you obviously spent many years training, and you mentioned about kind of the training aspect you do. What is the part of it? Was obviously leadership training. What were some of the biggest issues that you saw then with that type of thing going wrong?
Going wrong?
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, I would be the first. I mean, I've earned my living for the last 30 years in the training and development business, or learning and development business, however you want to phrase it. And frankly, I think it's still true that it's got a poor reputation amongst a lot of people in organisations, HR, CEOs, you know, financial directors, etc., etc. And I think in many ways that's probably appropriate. And the reason I say that is not to be disparaging of my colleagues in the T&D business. I think it's because it doesn't deliver, whether it's leadership, whether it's sales, whether it's supervision, whatever. It often doesn't deliver results that the organisations are looking for. Mm-hmm. So then the question is, well, why doesn't it do that? And I go back to my experience working at BP, and can remember several occasions when my various line managers would call me into their office and say, you're going on this course next week or the week after, whenever it was due to be. And that course could be around negotiation, it could be around supervision, it could be around any one of a number of topics. Mm-hmm. I genuinely do not recall a single occasion when my manager concerned said to me, and this is why I'm doing this. It's like, you will go to this fancy hotel down in Brighton, you know, you will sit there for 3 or 5 days and suffer accordingly, without telling me why I would have to do this. So I would go away totally confused, you know, while I admitted that I you know, my performance, you know, did need some work, and no two ways about that. But I never got any clue as to why this training course was going to be, the thing that sorts me out kind of thing. So I would go and I would sit in a room with any number of people. I would get back, maybe a day later, maybe 3 days later, 5 days later, however. And I don't recall a single occasion on which my manager called me into his office and said, "Okay, how did it go? What did you learn? How can I help you? What would you like to do differently?" And I discovered, much to my subsequent chagrin, that actually this was what became known as ticking a box.
Mm.
Except I hadn't heard the expression back then. So he'd managed to tick a box, which meant that on his appraisal, he could say, "Yeah, well, I sent Ian and I sent Dexter and I sent so-and-so on training courses." And he would then get a pat on the back from his boss. The problem is, or was and still is with that, I think, is that means that the company concerned has spent a lot of money and got zero return. Because all you do, you go away, with a good trainer, if you're lucky, you get fired up, you get motivated, but you go back and within a week, that comfort zone drags you back into the way that you were doing things before, because there is no follow-up to it. And just breaking aside for a second, follow-up or follow-through is something that I would say is crucial when you're in business for yourself. You set plans, you've got to follow them through. You go on maybe a seminar up in London and you get a great marketing idea. You've got to follow through. And ditto with the training. So that for me is one of the reasons why it doesn't work, Dan, in answer to your interesting question. There are a couple of others. I think for me it needs a partnership. And that partnership is based on honesty. So when I was in sales mode, I got really lucky because I went on a sales training course myself and learned actually that probably the most important question as a salesperson you can ever ask somebody about their product, whether it's a car, training company, is why is that important to you? Why is the car important to you? Why is this training program important to you? Because if you ask that question, what you will get back is their values. And you then know what it is that you're going to have to deliver. So instead of me saying to you, my training program, my leadership training program will do this, can do that, will do this, can do that, will do this and do that. That's very different from me saying to you, what would you like a training program to deliver? How do you want your people to be different when they come back? And as I lucked out because I learned that lesson early on, and that really did. I think that helped in getting some of the bigger clients that we spoke about earlier on, because I think it's a different approach. This notion of collaborative selling. Now I know it's familiar to a lot of people today. It wasn't 30 years ago. It was all about I'm here to tell you, rather than me asking you. So I think that's another reason why it fails, because it doesn't deliver. Why doesn't it deliver? Because as the trainer, the salesperson, you don't know what it is that they want you to deliver. So those I think are the two reasons I would point to.
Oh, sorry, I'm asking lots of questions because it interests me. But
Go for it.
what when you're on these training courses, you're running these training courses, and obviously I know I've known you a good few years now, and obviously the client bank says that you're very good at what you do. What were the biggest, I don't want to say, what was the biggest training needs you could see when you were delivering these courses from leaders? What gaps could you consistently see there?
Next question. What are the biggest training gaps? I think I always used to, before we set out on any training program, and even if it was repeat business, we would, before the first module, because all of our programs were multi-modular, we would get together with the delegates and basically introduce ourselves, number one, but to try and explain to them that we're not here to tell them how to do their job. because if, let's say our friends up at MSC Shipping in Ipswich, if I were doing their export documentation, I would be sunk, pardon the metaphor kind of thing, but I would be sunk within about 5 minutes. I have no experience in that field. So I think for me, our job has been about getting what is already in there out. Mm-hmm. The skills they already have out of them, which in many ways require them to feel confident enough to do that. So we used to say to people, look, if don't tell the boss man or the boss lady, but this is not a leadership program. This is not a management program. This is not a supervisory program. This actually is a personal development program as applied to leadership, or management, because you have to work with and develop the person as much as, if not more, than you have to develop their skills. Because you see, I could work with you two lovely people, and I could train you in a particular topic. Let's say it's sales for the sake of argument, but I could give you sales behaviours. I could give you sales skills, and you would go away really buoyed up and motivated and can't wait to get back. La 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 la. But what if you got back to your company and you didn't actually believe that you could use those new skills or behaviours? If there was something at the back of your mind which was stopping you using those skills or behaviours, and even if you believed you could use them, what if you didn't actually value using them? What if they weren't important to you to use them? So for us, we worked as much with their beliefs and values as we did about their skills and behaviours. Because otherwise, what would happen is within a week, they would just revert to type, and we would then get a call from the HR director or the finance director saying, well, we've invested a lot of money and nothing's changed. Well, of course it hasn't, because they don't believe in it enough to want to change it. So it was always our way. And again, this is going to sound blowing out my ex-trumpet. I don't know many training companies that did that, because most training was, and I believe, I'm speaking from personal experience, I believe still is very much about, well, here's another sales skill, here's another management skill, here's another leadership skill, without working with you to make sure that you can actually use it in some way.
That was
sorry, Dan?
No, I was going to say, that was a brilliant answer without giving a list of things of they weren't good at this, weren't good at that. I really like it.
Well, there was obviously, easy for me to say, there were obviously skill gaps. But you can't, for me, we couldn't, and I don't believe you can work on that until you've worked on the person.
No, that's what I mean.
Get the person right.
Makes,
but if you want subjects, here we go. Let's give you some subjects, right? The big one, the number one for me was, and I think will permanently be, even with the advent of AI and other such stuff that I know nothing about. But I think it will be communication. I did a podcast last year on understanding misunderstandings. And it's got nothing to do with intelligence. Communication has got nothing whatsoever to do with intelligence. I know some incredibly intelligent people with degrees coming out of their ears who cannot communicate their way out of a wet paper bag because they don't understand what communication is. And for me, communication is, as a leader, as a manager, getting something that's in my head out of this or through writing into your head in a way that you understand it. And
I think that's a really good definition.
It's I say, I wish that were mine, but it wasn't. I actually pinched that. I must give it back sometime. But it really is, and then of course what happens is, well, it's your fault because you didn't understand. No, it's actually my fault if you don't understand, because I haven't made myself clear enough. Now, the flip side of that is if I'm on the receiving end of a communication from somebody, friend, colleague, whoever, if I'm not sure I've understood, then it's my responsibility to check out, what do you mean by that? So I used to go on these training courses, and you'd have a trainer at the front of the room, usually in a very sharp suit, saying communication is 50-50. It's 50% the sender, it's 50% the recipient. And that's not true. That's not true. It's 100% sender, it's 100% recipient. You and I, have both got to take 100% responsibility for making sure that the communication process between us works. Otherwise, you get what's known as a misunderstanding. And a colleague of ours, of many years standing, he said there's no such thing as a misunderstanding, there's just miscommunication.
Yeah.
And that kind of works for me. So you want specifics, Dan? Yeah, communication. As I say, if I had the power to improve communication in teams and organisations, I mean, Lord knows, we had 8 people working at Eagle Training, and if you think that we never had communications issues, you would be very, very wrong. So after we'd beaten each other up, and we realised that miscommunication is everywhere, really. So communication is one, I think. Probably the big one. I think from a leadership perspective, not understanding leadership is the big challenge.
Okay.
And it's not, there's 3 elements. There's the title of leader, which you get given. Mm-hmm. There's the acting as a leader, the behaviours. Mm-hmm. And then there are the skills of leadership which you bring to your team. And some people think that just having CEO, financial director, whatever the title is enough to make them the leader. No, it's not. And the other thing that it's bugged me for many years, and it to a certain extent it still does, even though I'm not involved in the business anymore. Is I can only call it's a lack of authenticity. And I think we all need to be authentic. What people see is what people get, kind of thing. But I think in leadership and management, I think it's more important than ever these days to be authentic, which means to hold your hand up when you've made a mistake. To say sorry if you've spoken to somebody in a way that was out of order. However much pressure you're under when you said whatever it was that you said, and it's almost like being vulnerable, which I know is a bit of a these days it's quite up there as a topic, but vulnerability and authenticity, or lack of, I think, are mistakes that people make in leadership.
Here's a little shout out to our sponsors, Xero, who are, in my opinion, the best accounting software out there for small business owners. And one of the reasons I believe this is the report centre. And gone are the days where you'd have to wait however long for your accountant to get you that profit and loss report, so you know where you're at. At the touch of a button, you can run that report, you can see exactly where you are, sales, expenses, and your profits, and you've got that information then to make decisions and do what you need to do with your business. Check out Xero today at xero.com. That's Xero with an X, xero.com. I think where people feel they can't be is because they're meant to be this person that everyone looks to, and they feel they need to be perfect. But we don't, do we? I mean, I'm first to hold my hand up and say I'm not perfect, and I'll apologise to my team when I've done something wrong, and wherever it is. And I think that builds trust as well, doesn't it?
It does.
Which is so important.
It does, and it is, Cheryl. You cannot truly lead people who don't want to be led.
No. And
most people don't want to be led because they lack trust in the person who's in that particular role. And again, if you don't mind me, I got incredibly lucky I've had a lot of luck, as you probably gathered, over 30 years. But I was managing a team at BP, and I'd been away for 2 weeks holiday, and I got back, and one of my team said, can I have a word? So I said, yeah, sure. And he said, you do know that we work better when you're not here, don't you? Yeah. And I thought, like, what? How dare you? You know, so my initial instinct was to fire him on the spot. Quite frankly. But fortunately, that little voice in my head says, no, just wait. So I asked him what he meant. You know, what do you mean by that? And it became clear that the way that I was managing was quite aggressive, you know, bullying to a certain extent, and furthermore, wasn't getting results. Because what that meant was that people were withdrawing what became known as discretionary effort, that effort they could give if they wanted to, over and above the contract of employment. So I had a meeting and said to them, like, you know, this is what's happened. Is it true? And yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So my instinct then was to fire all of them. But again, I thought about that again. And I said, well, what am I doing that I shouldn't do? What am I not doing that I should do? Mm. And there was a silence, and it was almost like, are you for real? Do you really want to know? And then eventually, this guy that had told me said, well, I can give you a couple of things. Said, great. So I literally wrote them down. And then gradually, when a couple of others said their two pieces into the discussion, I went away and I realised actually what I was doing, I was managing them in a way that I myself had been managed, and assumed that would be true in all cases, without understanding my people. You know, and it was a huge learning, which helped me when I went into the training side of things, because then I wasn't training out of a textbook. I was training from the various mistakes, of which there were many, that I had made as a manager. You know, and I think in many ways it helped me more than if I'd been a successful manager. To be able to say, look, there's a mistake I made back then, here's another mistake I made back then. You know, because I think there's something fundamentally human about admitting that you got it wrong.
But it also helps people to identify with you, and if you've made that mistake and you've fixed that mistake, or you've overcome it, or whatever the right terminology of that mistake is, they then trust in you that they can follow your guidance, don't they?
I believe so, Cheryl. Yeah, I really do. I mean, it's a principle by which I then developed as a manager, and funnily enough, my results were okay. Through using fear, which essentially it was, but they got better by being what I will call a more soft manager. And I again had the fortune to meet and work with a gentleman called Alan Bailey, and he said, you know, I've got to get this right because it's gone wrong so many times in the past. You know, don't mistake hard management for strong management.
Yeah.
And don't mistake soft management for weak management.
No, I guess it's understanding your team enough to know how to get the best out of them.
Absolutely.
And then applying that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's understanding their personality type and the way they think, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, it is. It is. And it's so if you've got a team of 10 people, you're managing 10 different people. There is no one way to manage all of them that's going to work for all of them. You know, and that got me into looking at various behavioural instruments and assessments to really get, you know, how can I understand the different people and their styles differently, and that again was a huge driver forward of the work that we were doing. So I'm not sure that's answered your specific question, Dan, but
no, I love it. So I'm very, yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's the same with anything, isn't it? As well, not just leadership. With I don't consider. I mean, I suppose people would define my role as a sales role, but I've never ever seen it that way. I've seen it as relationship building and understanding the person that I'm sitting talking to. I get much more out of knowing the people I work with and the clients that I have than anything else. So
yeah, and I'm 100% with you. I think Cheryl said something about that earlier on, but I think for me that notion of partnership collaboration is absolute key. You know, when we talked earlier about, you know, what's your message, you know, to the people you want to attract. We found that we had started to attract people, and you know, not necessarily the name of the company, but we attracted the HR or the, you know, managing directors, CEOs, whoever. But we attracted them because it became clear they wanted to work with a collaborative organisation, which would mean Rick picking the phone up to me and saying, you know, that last session worked really well, or indeed that last session didn't go as well as we would have liked. You know, we've had some feedback that there were a couple of things that didn't really, you know, work as well as we would wanted to. So it's not lovey-dovey stuff, this collaboration. It can be quite hard to do sometimes. But we had a repeat business rate when we closed the doors. We look back over our time and we had a repeat business rate probably in the region of 60%. That's good. Which we are incredibly proud of. And I think we got that partly because people enjoyed working with us, but partly because of the way we work with them, which was in this collaborative way. Yeah, because if you go out determined to get one over on a client, yeah, you'll get the one deal, you know, but that'll be it. And your name in the marketplace won't stand up to scrutiny. You know, whereas if you collaborate with somebody, if you work in partnership with somebody, not only will they come back to you again, but if they move to another organisation, they'll pick the phone up and your client list has just grown by one. Or they'll say to you, oh, I was talking to so-and-so the other day in such and such a company, give them a ring. And that is really marketing, you know, magic to be able to do that. You know, gone are the days of picking the phone up and cold calling hundreds of people. You just pick up the phone. You know, oh, I was told by Lisa to give you a ring. Oh, yeah, I've been expecting your call. Great. You know, and it's then yours to lose in many ways.
But exactly what you say there is exactly got my industry a terrible name, and why it needed so much reform. And I'm pleased to say it got that. So now we are seen as professional advisors rather than salespeople, because that's how it should be. The exact reason about, you know, collaboration, building partnership, and
it's really funny though. It's really funny, you know, because when we did, I've retired, Ian, remember that. When we used to do sales training courses, we would start off, one of the first exercises we would do is to say, okay, blank sheet of paper, write down 10 words that to you describes either sales, selling, or salesperson. And I can tell you that probably 70% of what was written down was negative. Liars, cheats, and all this kind of derogatory stuff. And I remember thinking, these are sales professionals doing this exercise, and that's how they see it.
It's pretty scary, really.
It was, Cheryl. It absolutely was. You know, and we knew then we had our work cut out over the next sort of 2 days, 3 days, however long it was. But I have to say, on the flip side of that, and I'm generalising in the extreme, please forgive me, but salespeople, especially people who've been in the sales business for a long time, were probably the hardest people we ever had to work with. They really were.
I can see that.
Yeah, and you could see it when they walked into the room. I've been in sales for 25 years. What are you going to tell me?
Yeah, but I think to be a salesperson, you have to be fairly confident in yourself and your own abilities, don't you? So therefore, receiving criticism or potential construction of how they can be better is not in their nature. And that's not to be disrespectful or anything. It's because you have that belief in yourself that you are brilliant, and that's why you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
But
you couldn't do it without that confidence in yourself or in your product.
No, definitely
That's
not.
absolutely sure. And again, if I go back to my early days when the business was new, number one, getting sales appointments was incredibly difficult. But number two, when I went on those sales appointments, I had a little bit of, in my head, that little bit of a voice indicating that I wasn't perhaps as confident in me or the product as perhaps I should have been. Which of course leaks, doesn't it? It comes out. Yeah. Whether it's in what you say, whether it's how you say it, or whether it's in your body. That lack of confidence does certainly come to the fore. And it was okay. So what do I need to make myself more confident, self-confident, but also confident in the company and what it is I'm selling to people? And that took a lot of work.
And I think that's probably where a lot of business owners struggle, because their skills are in doing the doing, not in selling.
Absolutely right.
So to sell ourselves, we don't have that confidence, do we?
Yeah.
So
you're absolutely right there, Cheryl. 100%, if you don't mind me saying so. And in many ways, that goes back to a question we were talking about earlier on. Because when we set the business up all those years ago, one of the first things we did, we went to some local companies and said, why do you promote people into positions of authority, i.e. supervisory, team leader, manager, whatever the job title is? And I forgot the exact number, but it was something in the mid-80s. Said, well, they're good at their job. So there was this assumption that if you're good at production, whatever you're producing, you will by definition make a good production manager. Well, there is no guarantee of that, because it's a different game. You're into a different field of activity. Interestingly, the second one was that they've been with the company a long time. So it's like their turn. Yeah. The third one was that they were popular with their team, so they'll have an easy trip into management. Well, I'm here to tell anybody that moving from being one of the boys, if you like to use that phrase, to managing the boys is a heck of a difficult step.
yeah.
A heck of a difficult step. The fourth one, interestingly, was that they are related one way or another to somebody at the top. And enough said on that one. And the fifth and final one was that something about them had been identified that they were good with people, and with training that they could be a good supervisor, team leader or manager, which came in.
That should be number one.
Well, yeah, but I suspect if you go out now and did the same thing, you would probably get maybe not as high a percentage, but you would probably still get that same thing, which is that they have the skill set technically, as you said, Cheryl. Technically, they're good. They therefore will be a good manager. No. I'm living proof of that. I mean, I was technically good at the job I did, but as a manager, jeepers creepers, I was horrible in more ways than one.
I wouldn't say building a successful training company made you a horrible manager. So you must have being 8 people.
No, sorry, I'm talking about when I became. I was 25 when I got my first supervisory role. Mm-hmm. And as I say, I think I've been managed in that aggressive style, that machismo style, and I thought that was it. I thought that's what you did. I thought you basically raised your voice to people. I thought basically you told them if the job wasn't done by Thursday afternoon, they would be out, and scare the living daylights out of people. And to a certain extent it worked, but my staff turnover was the highest in the organisation. You know, people were digging tunnels at night to get out, kind of thing. You know, so yeah, and it kind of leads me on really, because if I were in the business of employing somebody now, I would spend an awful lot of time looking at their CV, obviously, although I recognise it's probably the most lied upon document on the face of the planet. And we've all done it, right? We've all done it. I know I have. And spend some time looking at that, obviously, but also work out the person, get to know the person that's, you know, you're with. And part of that is getting to know what their values are, because if you as a team, if you as a business have got core values, and most organisations say they have, but they don't because they don't understand it. I mean, they've got you know, posters up on walls. You know, our core values are integrity, loyalty, customer. Forget it. You know, you ask them how they do that, and they go, "Well, yeah, they don't know." So it's finding out and matching the person and what they value, i.e., what's important to them, to what you want your employees or staff members to have. Because if your values as a business knit with their personal values, they're going to be around for a long time. Because they can see how their values are being manifest in the organisation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And this is why we bang on about it so much in my business, because exactly that. And we even take clients on based on if their values are aligned or not, because again, it means if their values are aligned, we're going to have a good working relationship.
Yep. Yeah. We have, over the years, we have fired clients.
Yeah.
We fired several of them, primarily because what their values were not aligned to ours. You know, we had a list, if you like, of industries which we would not entertain. So one of them was the tobacco industry. We said no. You know, that's a value of ours. People want to smoke, people smoke. That's fine. So we were approached by a very large multinational tobacco industry company, and we looked at it and thought, "Jeepers, this is going to be a lot of money." You know, and we kind of looked around the table, and it's like, yeah, but you know, our values are. So we had to thank them for their interest, but basically say no.
It's hard, isn't it?
Oh, you bet.
But, yeah.
You bet. And many of the time I thought about ringing him up saying, you know, we said no. But we never did. No. We never did.
No.
So, yeah.
Living to your values is extremely important, isn't it? It's extremely important.
You know, let's go back to what Cheryl was saying earlier. If you as a business or if you as an individual, if you are prepared to violate the values that you have, where does that leave your authenticity?
Yeah.
You know, and the answer is, to me, it's in shreds. Absolutely in shreds.
No, it definitely is.
Which is why we used to love doing values-based work. It was brilliant. It was always very controversial. Always very controversial. But it wasn't half fun. It was always fun to do. And fun to see the results as well.
Yes.
You know, and that wasn't about us imposing, you know, values that the head person wanted to impose. It was about, well, you know, come on, you're the senior leadership team. How do you, as a senior leadership team, how do you want to work together? You know, and by the way, what will you do if somebody in this team around this table today? What will you do if somebody does violate it through their behaviours?
Yeah,
that was always a tough question to ask people.
Important one, though, because it shows the integrity of someone, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not sure you can fire somebody because they violated one of the company's core values, unless it also then became sort of a misconduct issue or dishonesty issue. But it needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
I was once asked by a client, and they're still wanting me to do some work with them. You know, what would you do with somebody who was delivering results, but they were doing so by violating the values? So commercially, they're doing a great job. And I said, if you want my honest opinion, which I'm prepared to give you, I would get rid of them. I would pay them off. Because they will be toxic to those people around them.
Yeah, totally.
You know? And they did. God, I've been controversial.
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
Not at all. No, it's been it's just quite a hard hitting subject, isn't it? It's quite. I'm just sitting here thinking for myself about times that applies and and how would have it been dealt with differently if I thought of it in that way rather than. But then you can't live going backwards, can you? So all you can do is learn and move forwards.
No, that's somebody much wiser than me said. That's why the windscreen in your car is bigger than the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like
Penny drop.
I like that. I do like that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to play mum now, I'm afraid. Because I've loved chatting, but we're going to have to round it up.
No promise.
So,
thanks for the invite. I really enjoyed it.
I've got two last questions for you. So the first one, we've been asking everybody this on this season. So is there a book that you've taken a lot of value from that you can recommend to the people listening?
That's like asking somebody for their top 10 records.
Sorry.
In all honesty, Cheryl, there are so many, but the one I think that got me into, more than any other book, into the area that I'm in now, was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay.
Which was, for me, the book around personal change that I needed at that time in my life. So if I had to pick one, it would be that one.
Thank you.
I like that.
It's one I've got in my book on my Kindle, but I've still not read. So everyone keeps talking about it. I'm going to have to make a point of reading it.
Please do. Yeah.
I'm going to have to work out what my reading list is this summer on holiday. Because I've got about 5 I want to read.
Yeah, well, mine keeps growing from every time we do one of these to get new recommendations. So I go off and get that book, man.
I have to do a sort of a government health warning on this, Cheryl. It's not an easy read book. It's difficult, but it makes you think.
Yes, that's what you want, though, isn't it? That's what I think a good book does. It makes you think. It makes you look at the way you do things or the way you think, and it helps you to grow. Yeah. So that's the idea of it.
And the second question.
Thank you. I'm going to pop the link for that in the show notes as well. So if anyone else wants to check it out, they can do. So my last question then would be, so obviously you had this amazing career predominantly with the training and learning and development. If you didn't do that, what would you have liked to have done, or what would you like to do in your retirement?
Can I have a choice of those two questions then? What would I have done? I think I would have probably stayed with BP in and around the area of oil and finance, and I would be looking back now as a 67-year-old thinking, I wish I hadn't done that. What do I want to do in retirement? I've got one young granddaughter. I've got another literally on the way. Oh, my daughter's expecting later in the year. So I want to take time to really get to know the grandchildren and the family and do simple. I'm not a big thing person. I'm simple kind of thing. So to go do a walking, spend a day on the beach, that kind of stuff. So nothing too extravagant. But just be content. Just be content.
Love that. I like it.
What I need for that though is money.
We have told you don't get paid for this podcast, haven't we? I've told you that.
Yeah, it's, the thing is there's more going out than coming in at the moment. So hey,
Yeah. Cost of living does that to people, I think.
We need someone to give us good advice.
Yes.
I'll try and find something.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to meet you and to learn more about your career. And I could actually chat to you for hours about the whole culture and values and peace. I love all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, please do, because even though I'm not retired, the subject matter still interests me immensely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Very, very welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
If you did, please like and subscribe, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So please do leave us a review or drop us a DM on our Instagram @Found a Life Podcast.
See you in the next episode.